The banners of Wei rippled against the gusts of an early autumn wind as Cao Cao stood atop the ridge overlooking Yi, the heart of Yuan Shao's once mighty domain. His weathered face bore the marks of countless campaigns, yet his sharp, calculating eyes betrayed no weariness. The siege had lasted months, a relentless grind of attrition against the fortified walls. Now, as the gates splintered under the force of his battering rams and his troops poured into the city, the realization of victory began to settle over the camp. Yi was not merely a city, it was a symbol of Yuan Shao's dynasty, a testament to the wealth and power that once dominated the North China plain. To Cao Cao, it was another jewel to be added to his growing empire. To the people within, it was their last refuge, now reduced to chaos. The cries of battle and the acrid scent of burning would fill the air as his soldiers swept through the streets, securing strongholds, arresting resistors, and looting what little remained after the prolonged siege. Among the frightened and displaced citizens, a figure moved with an unearthly calm. Lady Zhen, known in the poetic tongues of the north as Zhen Luo or Chan Mat, was the wife of Yuan Shi, one of Yuan Shao's sons. Her beauty was renowned across the land, yet it was her poise and intelligence that truly set her apart. Even in the face of calamity, she carried herself with a grace that seemed almost unnatural amid the chaos. The fall of Yi was a foregone conclusion by the time the city gates crumbled. Yuan Shi and his brother Yuan Shang had fled eastward in a desperate attempt to regroup. They left behind their families, their loyalists, and a city teetering on the brink of destruction. Lady Zhen, however, refused to flee. Perhaps it was loyalty to the people of Yi, or perhaps it was the futility of running from the inevitable. Regardless, when the gates fell, she remained, standing among the crowd as Cao Cao's forces streamed in. Cao Cao entered the city at the head of his army, his armor gleaming despite the dust of battle. The people knelt in submission as his steely gaze swept across the square, evaluating the faces before him. His reputation preceded him, a brilliant but ruthless strategist, a man who rewarded loyalty but crushed dissent without hesitation. Yet, as his eyes landed on Lady Zhen, he paused. Amid the sea of bowed heads, she stood straight. Her veil, though partially concealing her face, could not hide her unwavering gaze. It was not defiance, nor was it fear. It was something else entirely, a quiet strength, a dignity that seemed untouched by the devastation around her. For a moment, the conqueror in Cao Cao gave way to the man. He was captivated, not by her beauty alone, but by her composure. "Who is that woman?" he asked, his voice low but commanding. An officer at his side hesitated before answering. "That is Lady Zhen, my lord, the wife of Yuan Shi." Cao Cao's expression was inscrutable as he regarded her. The name was familiar. The Zhen family was among the most prominent in the region, their wealth and influence second only to the Yuans. That she had married into the Yuan family was no surprise. Yet her presence here, unbroken amidst the collapse of her husband's legacy, intrigued him. "Bring her to me," he commanded. Lady Zhen was escorted to the governor's residence, now repurposed as Cao Cao's headquarters. The opulence of the mansion stood in stark contrast to the suffering outside its walls, a silent reminder of the wealth that once flowed through Yi. As she was led into the chamber where Cao Cao awaited, she walked with measured steps, her posture upright despite the tension that hung heavy in the air. Cao Cao sat at the center of the room, flanked by his advisors and officers. He watched her approach, his sharp eyes missing nothing: the elegance of her movements, the steadiness of her expression, the faint shadows of exhaustion beneath her veil. When she stopped before him, she did not kneel, nor did she avert her gaze. "You do not bow before me," he remarked, his tone laced with curiosity rather than reproach. "My lord," she replied, her voice calm yet firm. "A wife bows only before her husband. Though my husband is defeated, I remain his wife." Her words, though simple, carried a weight that silenced the room. The tension was palpable as Cao Cao leaned forward slightly, his lips curving into a faint smile. "Brave words," he said, his voice low and thoughtful. "Braver than I've heard from most men. But bravery, Lady Zhen, does not save lives." There was no fear in her eyes as she met his gaze. "Nor does submission guarantee them, my lord." The chamber fell into a stunned silence. No one dared speak, their eyes darting between the two figures. Cao Cao's smile widened, a rare expression of genuine amusement. "You are unlike any woman I have encountered," he said. "Tell me, Lady Zhen, what do you seek to achieve with such defiance?" "I seek nothing, my lord," she replied. "What is left to seek when all is lost?" Her words struck a chord in him. He admired strength in all its forms, and here was a woman who embodied it in a way that transcended the battlefield. Yet, there was more to his interest than admiration. She intrigued him, challenged him, and in doing so, stirred something within him that he had long buried beneath the weight of war and ambition. He made his decision swiftly, as was his nature. "You will not remain here," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "A beauty such as yours does not belong to the ruins of the past. You will come to the Wei family." The room erupted in murmurs as his advisors exchanged uneasy glances. To take Lady Zhen into the Wei family was a bold move, one that could spark resentment among the defeated Yuans and even among his own ranks. Yet, Cao Cao was not a man to be swayed by dissent. His gaze never left hers as he issued the decree. Lady Zhen, however, said nothing. Her silence was not one of acquiescence, but of resignation. She understood the futility of resistance. Her fate, like that of so many others, was now a pawn in the grand game of power. Cao Cao, ever the strategist, saw an opportunity in her placement. He decided that she would be given to his son, Cao Pi. It was a calculated move, one that served multiple purposes. By giving her to Cao Pi, he could strengthen his son's position while also gauging his reaction. Cao Cao knew his son well, ambitious, clever, and eager to prove himself. How Cao Pi handled this gift would reveal much about his readiness to inherit the mantle of leadership. When Cao Pi first laid eyes on Lady Zhen, he was immediately captivated. Her beauty was undeniable, but it was her enigmatic demeanor that held his attention. Unlike the women who had flocked to his side in the past, she was not eager to please, nor did she seek his favor. There was a distance in her gaze, a subtle reminder that her heart and mind were not his to claim. Cao Pi, undeterred, pursued her with fervor. He lavished her with gifts, adorned her in silks and jewels, and sought to win her affection through grand gestures. Yet, for all his efforts, she remained an enigma. Outwardly, she played the role expected of her, compliant, graceful, and dutiful, but beneath the surface, she was a woman trapped in a web of power and ambition, her own desires buried beneath layers of obligation. As the days turned to weeks, a fragile balance settled over the Wei court. Cao Cao continued his campaigns, expanding his territory and consolidating his power. Cao Pi, meanwhile, reveled in his new role, parading Lady Zhen as a symbol of his rising stature. Yet, the tension between father and son was palpable, an unspoken rivalry that simmered beneath the surface. For Lady Zhen, life in the Wei family was a paradox. She was surrounded by luxury, yet she felt like a prisoner. She played her part with grace, but in her heart, she longed for freedom, a freedom she knew she could never attain. Her presence became a silent axis around which the ambitions of father and son revolved, each seeking something different from her, yet neither truly understanding the depths of her spirit. Cao Cao, ever the observer, watched from a distance as the dynamics unfolded. He saw the way Cao Pi doted on her, the way his son's eyes lit up in her presence. Yet, there was a part of Cao Cao that could not let go of his own fascination with her. He had given her to Cao Pi out of strategy, but the decision gnawed at him in ways he could not fully explain. The seeds of conflict were sown. though none could yet predict how they would bear fruit. In the halls of power, amidst the whispers of courtiers and the echoes of ambition, a silent storm brewed, a storm that would test the bonds of loyalty, love, and power in ways that none could foresee. The halls of Suchong echoed with the rhythmic clatter of footsteps, the imperial court alive with the business of governance and war. Cao Cao, now firmly entrenched as the Chancellor of Han, was a man with one foot in ambition and the other in power. His authority, though nominally under Emperor Xian, had expanded into near-absolute rule. Suchong, his chosen capital, became a symbol of his dominance, a city where politics, intrigue, and military planning intertwined. Lady Zhen's arrival in the Wei household caused ripples far beyond the walls of the court. Word of her beauty and poise spread quickly, igniting whispers among officials and nobles alike. Though she was formally installed as the wife of Cao Pi, it did little to quell the unease among those who knew the delicate dynamics of the family. To some, she was a trophy of conquest. To others, potential threat. Cao Pi, for his part, basked in the attention her presence brought. As the eldest surviving son of Cao Cao, he carried the weight of expectation, a burden amplified by his father's reputation. Unlike his younger brothers Cao Zhang, known for his martial prowess, and Cao Ji, celebrated for his poetic genius, Cao Pi was neither a warrior nor a scholar. His strength lay in his cunning, his ability to navigate the labyrinth of court politics. And now, with Lady Zhen by his side, he felt his position strengthened. Yet, their marriage was not a union of love. Cao Pi was enamored with her beauty, but Lady Zhen remained distant, her heart burdened by memories of Yi, the fall of her family, the flight of Yuan, and her forced role in the Wei family haunted her. Though she played the part of a dutiful wife, there was a wall between them, one that Cao Pi could not breach. Cao Cao, ever the strategist, was not oblivious to these dynamics. From his vantage point, he observed his son's interactions with Lady Zhen, noting the imbalance of affection. To Cao Cao, relationships were tools of power, and Lady Zhen's presence in the family was a carefully calculated move. Yet, despite his pragmatism, he found himself drawn to her in ways he could not fully articulate. It began with fleeting encounters, passing her in the gardens, seeing her among the courtiers, catching glimpses of her in quiet moments of reflection. Her composure, her quiet strength, and the air of melancholy that surrounded her stirred something within him. She was a reminder of everything he admired: resilience, intelligence, and grace under pressure. One evening, as the court settled into its nightly routines, Cao Cao summoned Lady Zhen to a private audience. The request was unexpected, and Lady Zhen approached the meeting with a mix of caution and curiosity. When she entered the chamber, she found him seated alone, his expression thoughtful. "You honor me with your presence, my lord," she said, bowing gracefully. Cao Cao gestured for her to rise. "Lady Zhen," he began, his tone unusually gentle, "I have long wanted to speak with you, not as the Chancellor of Han, but as a man who admires what you have endured." His words caught her off guard. She had expected formality, perhaps even condescension, but not this. "You are kind, my lord," she replied, her voice measured. "But I am merely a woman who has survived the winds of fate." "Survived?" he echoed, leaning forward. "And thrived. Few could endure what you have and remain unbroken. Tell me, Lady Zhen, do you not resent the circumstances that brought you here?" The question hung in the air, heavy with implications.
Lady Zhen met his gaze,
her expression unreadable. "Resentment is a luxury I cannot afford, my lord. The past is beyond my reach, and the present demands my focus." Cao Cao smiled, a rare, genuine smile that softened his sharp features. "Spoken like a true strategist," he said. "You remind me of someone I once knew, a warrior who faced every challenge with the same unyielding spirit." The conversation lingered, stretching into the night, They spoke not of politics or war, but of philosophy, poetry, and the fleeting nature of life. For Cao Cao, it was a revelation. Lady Zhen was not merely a figure of beauty. She was a woman of intellect, her thoughts as captivating as her presence. For Lady Zhen, the encounter was unexpected. Though she did not trust him, she could not deny the depth of his words, the way he seemed to understand her struggles in a way no one else had. As the days passed, their interactions grew more frequent. Cao Cao found reasons to include her in court gatherings, praising her insight and elegance. To the courtiers, it was a delicate dance, a man of immense power drawn to his son's wife, a relationship fraught with potential scandal. To Cao Pi, it was a source of both pride and unease. He reveled in the attention his wife brought but could not ignore the shadow of his father's interest. The tension came to a head during a banquet held to celebrate a recent military victory. The hall was alive with music and laughter as nobles and generals toasted the success of Wei. Lady Zhen, seated beside Cao Pi, was the picture of grace, her every movement watched with admiration. Cao Cao, seated at the head of the table, raised his cup. "To the victories that have brought us here," he declared, his voice commanding the attention of the room, "and to the beauty and wisdom that guide us forward." His gaze lingered on Lady Zhen as he spoke, the implication clear. The room fell silent, the unspoken tension palpable. Cao Pi's grip on his cup tightened, his jaw clenched as he forced a smile. Lady Zhen, ever composed, inclined her head slightly, acknowledging the toast without betraying her discomfort. The banquet ended without incident, but the undercurrents of rivalry between father and son grew stronger. Cao Pi, though outwardly respectful, began to harbor resentment. He knew his father's power was absolute, but he also knew that power could be challenged. In Lady Zhen, he saw not just a wife, but a symbol, a prize that would define his place in the legacy of Wei. For Lady Zhen, the situation was a delicate balancing act. She was caught between two powerful men, each seeking something different from her. Cao Cao admired her strength and intellect, while Cao Pi sought to claim her as his own. Yet, in their pursuit, neither truly understood her. She was a woman shaped by loss and resilience, her heart a labyrinth of emotions that defied their ambitions. As the days turned to weeks, the fragile equilibrium of the Wei household began to fracture. Cao Pi's jealousy grew, manifesting in subtle slights and veiled accusations. Cao Cao, though aware of his son's unease, remained unmoved, his focus on the broader game of power. And Lady Zhen, though outwardly composed, felt the weight of their expectations pressing down on her. The storm brewing within the walls of Suchong was one that would not be contained. It was a clash of wills, a collision of ambition and desire that threatened to unravel the delicate fabric of the Wei dynasty. For in the shadows of power, where love and loyalty intertwined with rivalry and betrayal, the seeds of conflict had been sown, and they would soon bear fruit. The first frost of winter blanketed Suchong in a pale shroud, the chill creeping into the grand halls of the Wei court. For most, it was a time to retreat into the warmth of hearths and chambers. But within the walls of Cao Cao's domain, there was no reprieve from the relentless machinery of ambition. The tension between father and son had grown, their silent rivalry threatening to spill into the open. And at the center of it all was Lady Zhen. Cao Pi had become increasingly restless, though he maintained the outward decorum befitting his station. The whispers that reached his ears chipped away at his composure. Courtiers spoke in hushed tones of his father's frequent praise for Lady Zhen, of the way his eyes lingered on her during gatherings, and of the private audiences he granted her. The implications were clear, even if no one dared voice them aloud. For Cao Pi, these rumors were not just an insult, they were a threat. He was the heir apparent to the Wei dynasty, yet here was his father, the indomitable Cao Cao, overshadowing him in every way. Lady Zhen was meant to be his victory, his mark of ascension, but now she had become a symbol of his father's dominance. One evening, As snow fell gently over the city, Cao Pi summoned Lady Zhen to his private chambers. She arrived, her steps measured, her expression calm as always. Yet she could sense the storm brewing beneath his composed exterior. "My lord," she said, bowing lightly, "you requested my presence?" Cao Pi stood by the window, his silhouette framed by the pale moonlight. For a moment, he did not turn, his hands clasped behind his back. "Do you know what they say about you, my lady?" he asked, his voice low but sharp. Lady Zhen remained composed. "The court is filled with whispers, my lord. I cannot account for all of them. They say," Cao Pi continued, his tone growing harsher, "that my father favors you more than he does me, that his admiration for you exceeds the bounds of propriety." She met his gaze evenly as he turned to face her. "And what does my lord believe?" His jaw tightened, his fists clenching at his sides. "I believe you have captured the attention of a man who takes what he wants, no matter the cost." Lady Zhen's expression softened, though her voice remained steady. "I am a woman caught in the currents of your family's power. My lord, my actions have always been dictated by duty, not desire." "Duty?" Cao Pi scoffed, stepping closer. "And where does that duty lie? With me, your husband, or with the Chancellor of Han, whose shadow you cannot seem to escape?" Lady Zhen's silence was telling, but not in the way Cao Pi expected. She did not flinch, did not offer excuses or denials. Instead, she held his gaze with a quiet strength that only infuriated him further. "You think yourself above reproach," he hissed, his voice trembling with frustration. "But I see through you, Lady Zhen. Do not think for a moment that you can manipulate me as you have others." Her response was as calm as ever. "I seek no power over you, my lord. My loyalty to you as your wife remains unbroken, even if your trust in me does not." Cao Pi stared at her for a long moment, his emotions warring within him. Then, with a sharp exhale, he turned away. "Leave me," he said, his voice cold. "I have no use for your riddles tonight." Lady Zhen bowed silently and departed, her footsteps echoing down the corridor. Though she did not show it, her heart was heavy. She had long understood the fragility of her position, but this confrontation made it clear just how precarious her existence had become. Meanwhile, Cao Cao was preoccupied with the grander game of empire. The Yuan family's remnants still posed a threat in the northeast, and the ambitions of Sun Quan and Liu Bei loomed like storm clouds on the horizon. Yet, even as he orchestrated military campaigns and political maneuvers, his thoughts often strayed to Lady Zhen. Cao Cao was not a man given to sentiment. His life had been one of relentless pragmatism, a series of calculated decisions that prioritized power over personal desire. But Lady Zhen represented something different, a quiet strength that resonated with him in ways he could not fully understand. She reminded him of the fragility of human connections, of the beauty that could exist even amidst chaos. One evening, as he reviewed reports from the front lines, his thoughts grew restless. Setting aside the scrolls, he summoned one of his trusted advisors, Chang Yu, a man of sharp intellect and unflinching loyalty. Chang Yu had long been a confidant in matters both political and personal. "My lord," Chang Yu said as he entered the chamber, bowing deeply. "You called for me?" Cao Cao gestured for him to rise. "Tell me, Chang Yu," he began, his tone uncharacteristically contemplative. "What do you make of Lady Zhen?" Chang Yu hesitated, careful to measure his words. "She is a woman of remarkable composure and intelligence, my lord. Her presence has brought much honor to the Wei family."
Cao Cao nốt đét lao.
"And yet, she has also brought division." He mused. "My son grows restless, his jealousy clouding his judgment. I wonder if I have made a mistake." Chang Yu regarded his lord carefully. "Lady Zhen is not the cause of this division, my lord," he said. "It is the nature of power itself that breeds rivalry. She is merely a catalyst."
Cao Cao sighed.
Leaning back in his chair, You are right, as always, but it is a dangerous game we play. Chang Yu, the bonds of blood are not immune to the weight of ambition. Chang Yu inclined his head. That is why wisdom must guide the hand that wields power. My lord, perhaps it is time to remind your son of his place, to quell his insecurities before they fester. Cao Cao's lips curved into a faint smile. You speak plainly. Chang Yu, that is why I value your counsel. Very well, I will address this matter. But first, there is a campaign to plan. With that, the conversation shifted to matters of war. But the undercurrents of the discussion lingered in Cao Cao's mind. As winter deepened, the tensions within the Wei household continued to grow. Cao Pi, emboldened by his frustrations, began to assert himself more aggressively in court. He surrounded himself with allies, whispering promises of favor and power to those who aligned with him. His ambition, once tempered by caution, now burned with the fire of resentment. Lady Zhen, caught in the crossfire, became increasingly isolated. Though she maintained her composure, the strain of navigating the treacherous waters of court politics took its toll. Her beauty, once a source of admiration, now felt like a curse, a beacon that drew unwanted attention and suspicion. The turning point came during a court assembly, where Cao Pi openly challenged one of his father's decisions regarding troop deployments. It was a bold move, one that shocked the gathered officials. Cao Cao's expression darkened as his son's voice rang out, questioning the wisdom of his strategy. When Cao Pi finished speaking, the room fell into a tense silence. All eyes turned to Cao Cao, who sat motionless for a moment before rising slowly. His gaze was icy as he addressed his son. You speak with conviction, Cao Pi, he said, his voice calm but laced with steel. But conviction without wisdom is a dangerous thing. Do not mistake your ambition for authority. Cao Pi's face reddened, but he held his ground. I merely seek to ensure the strength of Wei. Father, is it not my duty as your heir? Cao Cao's eyes narrowed. Your duty, Cao Pi, is to learn, to listen, and to understand that power is not given, it is earned. The words hung in the air like a guillotine. Cao Pi lowered his head, bowing stiffly before retreating to his seat. The assembly continued, but the rift between father and son had widened further. That evening, as Cao Pi brooded in his chambers, his anger simmered into a dangerous resolve. If his father would not recognize his worth, then he would find other means to assert his dominance. And in his mind, there was one clear path forward: to reclaim Lady Zhen, not just as his wife, but as a symbol of his independence from his father's shadow. For Lady Zhen, the storm was fast approaching. The delicate balance she had maintained was beginning to crumble, and the choices she would soon face would test her strength in ways she could not yet imagine. Winter's grasp on Suchong had tightened, and the chill in the air was mirrored in the fraying bonds within the Wei household. The once unspoken rivalry between Cao Cao and his son Cao Pi was now on the verge of erupting into outright conflict. While court life continued as if nothing was amiss, behind closed doors, alliances were forming, accusations were whispered, and loyalties were tested. For Lady Zhen, the storm was no longer distant thunder, it was upon her. She was the fulcrum of a struggle she neither desired nor encouraged. Yet she could feel the weight of their ambitions pressing down on her. Cao Pi's growing jealousy and resentment, coupled with Cao Cao's silent but undeniable fascination, had placed her in an impossible position. Though she maintained her composure, the strain was undeniable. One evening, as snow swirled outside the palace walls, Lady Zhen found herself summoned by Cao Pi. It was not the first time he had requested her presence since their strained conversation weeks earlier, but something in the tone of the messenger suggested urgency. She wrapped herself in a thick cloak and made her way to his chambers, her mind a mix of apprehension and resignation. When she arrived, Cao Pi was pacing the room, his movements agitated. He turned sharply as she entered, his eyes narrowing. "Lady Zhen," he said, his voice clipped, Do you know what they are saying now? She inclined her head, her expression calm. The court is filled with whispers. My lord, what is it they say this time? They say my father plans to elevate you, he hissed, stepping closer, that he intends to grant you a position of honor beyond what is appropriate for my wife. Do you deny it? Lady Zhen met his gaze without flinching. I deny nothing, my lord, for I have not been informed of such intentions. If the chancellor has plans, they are his alone. Cao Pi's jaw tightened. Do not play coy with me, he snapped. I see the way he looks at you, the way he calls you to his side during court gatherings. You think I am blind to his intentions? She sighed softly. My lord, I have no control over how your father regards me. My loyalty to you has never wavered, despite the circumstances. Loyalty? He barked, his voice rising. You speak of loyalty, yet you allow him to humiliate me, to overshadow me in my own house. Lady Zhen took a step back, her composure slipping slightly under the weight of his accusations. What would you have me do, my lord? Defy the man who holds the power of life and death over us all? Do you think that would serve your cause? Cao Pi's hands clenched into fists, and for a moment, she feared he might strike her, but instead, he turned away, his shoulders trembling with frustration. You think yourself above reproach, he muttered. But know this, Lady Zhen, I will not be made a fool, not by you, and not by him. She bowed her head slightly, her voice quiet. I am sorry you feel this way, my lord. I have done nothing but serve my role as your wife. Before he could respond, she turned and left the room, her footsteps echoing in the silence. As she walked back to her chambers, her thoughts churned. Cao Pi's jealousy was spiraling out of control, and she knew it would only grow worse unless something changed. Yet she felt powerless to alter the course of events.
Cao Cao,
meanwhile, was preoccupied with his campaigns. Reports from the front lines demanded his attention. Liu Bei was consolidating power in the west. Sun Quan's forces were growing stronger in the south, and the remnants of the Yuan family still lingered in the northeast. Yet, even amidst the chaos of war, his thoughts often drifted to Lady Zhen. It was not love, he told himself, but admiration, a respect for her strength and intellect. She was a rare woman, one who had endured immense loss yet carried herself with grace and dignity. He found himself seeking her counsel more frequently, inviting her to private audiences where they discussed philosophy, poetry, and even the intricacies of governance. She never overstepped her bounds, but her insights were sharp, her perspective refreshing. Cao Cao's advisors noticed the growing frequency of these meetings, and though few dared to voice their concerns, Chang Yu finally broached the subject during a private discussion. My lord, Chang Yu said cautiously, I must speak plainly, as is my duty. Cao Cao looked up from the scroll he was reading, his expression unreadable. Speak, Chang Yu. You have never been one to hold your tongue. Chang Yu hesitated before continuing. Your favor toward Lady Zhen has not gone unnoticed. It is the talk of the court, and your son grows increasingly restless. I fear this situation may lead to greater discord within the family. Cao Cao leaned back in his chair, his eyes narrowing. Do you question my judgment, Chang Yu? Never, my lord. Chang Yu replied quickly, but I do question the wisdom of allowing personal matters to interfere with the stability of your household. Your son is ambitious, and his anger may drive him to rash actions. Cao Cao was silent for a long moment, his gaze distant. Finally, he spoke. You are right, as always, Chang Yu, but ambition and anger are necessary in a ruler. Cao Pi must learn to temper them if he is to succeed me. And if he does not? Chang Yu pressed gently.
Cao Cao's adversino harden.
Then he will fail, and Wei will fall with him. The conversation ended, but Chang Yu's words lingered in Cao Cao's mind. He knew the danger of the situation, yet he could not bring himself to sever the connection he had with Lady Zhen. There was something about her that defied logic. something that kept drawing him back. The breaking point came during a grand feast to celebrate the new year. The hall was filled with the sound of music and laughter as nobles and generals toasted to Wei's continued success. Lady Zhen, seated beside Cao Pi, was the picture of elegance, her every movement graceful and deliberate. Cao Cao, seated at the head of the table, raised his cup. "To the strength of Wei," he declared, his voice commanding, "and to the wisdom and beauty that guide us through troubled times." His eyes rested on Lady Zhen as he spoke, and though the gesture was subtle, it was not lost on the assembled guests. Whispers spread through the hall, and Cao Pi's face darkened. He forced a smile, raising his own cup in response. But the tension was palpable. After the feast, Cao Pi confronted his father in private. The argument was heated, their voices echoing through the corridors of the palace. "You undermine me at every turn," Cao Pi accused, his tone sharp. "You praise her more than you praise your own son. Do you think I do not see what you are doing?" Cao Cao's expression was calm but stern. "You see only what you wish to see. Cao Pi, if you feel overshadowed, it is because you have allowed yourself to be. And whose fault is that?" Cao Pi shot back. "You bring her into the court, into our home, and expect me to simply accept it." Cao Cao's patience snapped. "Enough," he thundered. "You forget yourself. Cao Pi, I am still the Chancellor of Han, and you will show me the respect I am due." The silence that followed was heavy, the air between them charged with unspoken resentment. Finally, Cao Pi bowed stiffly. "As you wish, father," he said, his voice cold. "But know this, I will not be cast aside." He left the room, his anger simmering. For Cao Cao, the confrontation was a reminder of the precarious balance he had maintained for too long. For Cao Pi, it was the spark that ignited a fire he could no longer control. And for Lady Zhen, who heard the echoes of their voices from her chambers, it was a prelude to the storm that would soon engulf them all. The days following the confrontation between Cao Cao and Cao Pi were fraught with unease. Though court life proceeded with its usual ceremonies and political discussions, the atmosphere was thick with unspoken tensions. Cao Pi's anger simmered beneath a veneer of composure, while Cao Cao remained steadfast in his silence. Between them, Lady Zhen found herself walking an increasingly narrow line, her every move scrutinized by a court eager for scandal. Winter lingered, the chill seeping into the very bones of Suchong. Lady Zhen, ever mindful of her precarious position, retreated further into solitude. She spent her days in quiet contemplation, tending to the garden she had coaxed into bloom despite the frost. It was her sanctuary, a place where she could momentarily escape the weight of her circumstances. One afternoon, as she knelt among the frozen branches, arranging stones in a small stream, a shadow fell across her. She looked up to see Cao Cao standing there, his expression inscrutable. "My lord," she said softly, rising and bowing. "I did not expect to see you here." He waved a hand dismissively. "The affairs of state can wait a moment," he replied. "I needed a reprieve, and I thought of your garden." She studied him carefully, noting the lines of weariness etched into his face. Cao Cao was a man who bore the burdens of an empire, but in this moment, he seemed almost vulnerable. "You honor my humble efforts, my lord," she said. He stepped closer, his gaze drifting over the carefully arranged stones and dormant plants. "You have a talent for creating beauty, even in the harshest seasons," he remarked. "It is a rare gift. Survival often requires finding beauty where none seems to exist," she replied, her voice quiet but firm. He looked at her then, his eyes searching. "You speak as though you are merely enduring, Lady Zhen, but you are more than that. You have flourished despite the storms around you." She lowered her gaze, the weight of his words settling heavily on her. "Flourished, my lord?" she echoed. "I am but a woman who has learned to endure the will of powerful men." Cao Cao's lips pressed into a thin line, and for a moment, He was silent. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than she had ever heard it. I am not blind to what you have endured, Lady Zhen, nor am I ignorant of the strain my actions have placed upon you. If I have caused you pain, it was never my intention. Her eyes lifted to meet his, and for a fleeting moment, there was a shared understanding between them, an acknowledgement of the forces that had shaped their lives and the choices that had brought them to this moment. But before she could respond, the sound of hurried footsteps shattered the stillness. A messenger approached, bowing deeply before Cao Cao. "My lord," he said, his voice urgent, "your presence is required in the council chamber. News has arrived from the front." Cao Cao straightened, the moment broken. "Very well," he said, his tone once again commanding. He turned back to Lady Zhen, his expression unreadable. "We will speak again." As he departed, Lady Zhen watched him go, her thoughts a tumult of conflicting emotions. She had seen a side of Cao Cao that few ever glimpsed, a man not just of ambition and power, but of reflection and regret. Yet, the encounter left her feeling more isolated than ever, caught between two men whose desires and rivalries threatened to consume her. Cao Pi, meanwhile, was growing bolder in his defiance, frustrated by what he perceived as his father's favoritism and increasingly resentful of Lady Zhen's role in the dynamic. He began to gather support among the court. Allies were courted, promises were made, and whispers of dissent began to spread, though he was careful not to openly challenge Cao Cao. His intentions were clear. He would not be sidelined. One evening, he summoned his closest advisors to a secret meeting in his chambers. The air was thick with the scent of incense as they gathered around a low table, their voices hushed. "My father grows careless," Cao Pi began, his tone measured but laced with anger. "His judgment is clouded, his priorities misplaced. He lavishes attention on a woman while neglecting the needs of the state. It is time we remind him of the strength of Wei." One of his advisors, a cautious man named Lu Yi, spoke up. "My lord, confronting the chancellor directly could be dangerous. His power remains absolute. Absolute, but not unassailable." Cao Pi countered. "The court is restless. Many share our concerns but lack the courage to act. If we present a united front, we can force his hand." "And Lady Zhen?" another advisor asked. "She is at the heart of this conflict. What role will she play?" Cao Pi's expression darkened. "She has become a distraction, a symbol of my father's weakness. If she cannot be controlled, then she must be removed." The words hung in the air, chilling in their finality. Lu Yi hesitated, his brow furrowing. "My lord, Lady Zhen is your wife. To harm her would be a necessary sacrifice." Cao Pi interrupted, his voice cold. "Do not mistake sentiment for strength. The future of Wei depends on decisive action." The advisors exchanged uneasy glances but ultimately nodded in agreement. The plan was set in motion, and the die was cast. The next day, Lady Zhen received an unexpected visit from Cao Pi. He arrived unannounced, his demeanor uncharacteristically calm. She greeted him with her usual composure, though her instincts told her to be wary. "My lord," she said, bowing, "to what do I owe the honor of your visit?" He smiled faintly, a gesture that did little to mask the hardness in his eyes. "Must a husband have a reason to visit his wife?" he replied. She inclined her head. "Of course not, my lord. Forgive me." He gestured for her to sit, taking a seat opposite her. For a moment, they sat in silence, the tension between them palpable. Then, he leaned forward, his expression softening slightly. "Lady Zhen," he began, his voice low, "I have wronged you. In my anger, I have allowed myself to doubt your loyalty and your intentions. For that, I am sorry." She studied him carefully, her guarded expression betraying no emotion. "Your words are kind, my lord."
Ibiar no resentment.
He reached for her hand, his touch surprisingly gentle. "I wish to make amends," he said, Let us leave the past behind and move forward as husband and wife." Her instincts screamed at her to pull away, but she forced herself to remain still. "If that is your wish, my lord," she said softly. His smile widened, but there was something unsettling in his gaze. "Good. Then let us begin anew." As he rose to leave, she felt a chill settle over her. There was something in his demeanor, something she could not quite place, that filled her with a sense of foreboding. She watched him go, her mind racing. Whatever his intentions, she knew that she could not afford to let her guard down. That night, as the city slept under a blanket of snow, a shadowy figure slipped into Lady Zhen's chambers. She woke to the faint sound of footsteps, her heart pounding as she reached for the knife hidden beneath her pillow. "Who's there?" she demanded, her voice steady despite her fear. The figure stepped into the moonlight, revealing a face she recognized, a servant loyal to Cao Pi. His expression was conflicted, his hands trembling as he held out a scroll. "My lady," he whispered, "you must leave. Tonight." She frowned, her grip tightening on the knife. "Explain yourself." He hesitated, glancing over his shoulder before leaning closer. "Your life is in danger," he said. "The prince has ordered your removal. If you stay, you will not see another sunrise." Lady Zhen's breath caught, but she forced herself to remain calm. "And why would you risk your life to warn me?" "Because I have seen what happens to those who cross the chancellor," the servant replied. "And I know the prince underestimates you. You may yet survive this." Her mind raced as she weighed her options. To stay was certain death, but to flee would make her a fugitive, a pawn in a game of power she could never hope to win. Yet, as she looked into the servant's eyes, she saw the truth of his words. "Very well," she said, her voice firm. "Help me prepare." As the servant moved to gather her belongings, Lady Zhen cast one last look around her chambers. She had lived through the fall of Yi, the loss of her family, and the machinations of the Wei court. Now, once again, she found herself on the brink of a new and uncertain chapter. By the time the first rays of dawn pierced the horizon, she was gone, her fate entwined with the storm that would soon engulf the Wei dynasty. The first light of dawn revealed a snow-covered Suchong, its rooftops and courtyards shimmering under a pale winter sun. The palace, usually alive with the bustle of servants and courtiers, was eerily quiet. Lady Zhen had disappeared without a trace, her chambers abandoned save for the faint scent of incense lingering in the air. Cao Pi discovered her absence that morning. The servants cowered as his rage echoed through the halls. "Find her," he bellowed, his fists slamming against a wooden table, sending documents scattering to the floor. "Search every corner of the city. She cannot have gone far." His advisors exchanged uneasy glances, none daring to voice the obvious. Lady Zhen's departure could not have occurred without help. Someone within the palace had betrayed him, and the implications were dangerous. Cao Pi's fury, however, was not rooted solely in betrayal. Her escape was a direct challenge to his authority, a blow to his pride. Worse still, he knew the court would view it as a failure, a sign of weakness at a time when he could least afford it. As search parties combed Suchong, Cao Cao received word of the events. Unlike his son, his reaction was measured. He retired to his study, dismissing his advisors and closing the doors behind him. For a long while, he stood at the window, gazing out at the frost-covered gardens. Lady Zhen's departure stirred a mix of emotions within him. He had not expected her to leave, yet he could not bring himself to feel anger. If anything, he felt a pang of admiration for her courage. She had defied the inevitable, choosing to take her fate into her own hands, a rare act of defiance in a world where submission often seemed the only option. But there was also an undercurrent of regret. Cao Cao was not a man prone to sentimentality, yet Lady Zhen had awakened something within him that he had long suppressed. Her absence was a reminder of what could never be, of the fleeting nature of all things. Lady Zhen's escape had not been easy. The servant who warned her had secured a disguise and arranged for her to leave the city in a supply cart under cover of darkness. She traveled eastward, her destination uncertain. Every mile put more distance between her and the Wei court, yet it also deepened her sense of isolation. She thought often of her life in Yi, of her family and her first husband, Yuan. She wondered if he still lived, somewhere in the fractured remnants of the Yuan clan, or if he had perished in the chaos of war. The memories were bittersweet, a reminder of a time when her life had been her own. As the days turned to weeks, Lady Zhen settled in a small village on the outskirts of Wei territory. She lived simply, disguising herself as a widow and blending into the rhythms of rural life. Yet, even in this quiet corner of the world, news of the Wei court reached her. The tension between Cao Cao and Cao Pi had grown worse in her absence. The court was divided, with factions forming around father and son. Rumors spread of Cao Pi's growing impatience, of his ambition to claim power before his father relinquished it willingly. Cao Cao, for his part, remained unyielding. He had spent a lifetime building his empire, and he was not yet ready to pass the mantle. Yet, he also understood that his time was limited. The pressures of war and governance had taken their toll, and the conflicts within his family weighed heavily on him. Months passed, and the inevitable confrontation came to a head. Cao Pi, emboldened by his allies, confronted Cao Cao during a council meeting. The room was tense as father and son faced each other, their words sharp and unyielding. "You speak of unity and strength," Cao Pi said, his tone biting, "yet your actions sow discord within our family. How long will you cling to power? Father, do you not see that the time has come for a new leader to guide Wei?" Cao Cao's gaze was icy as he replied, "And do you think yourself ready for such a burden? Cao Pi, leadership is more than ambition, it is wisdom, patience, and sacrifice, qualities you have yet to demonstrate." The court held its breath as the two men stared each other down. Cao Pi, his face flushed with anger, refused to back down. "You underestimate me, father, but I will prove you wrong. Wei's future lies with me, not with a man who cannot see beyond his own shadow." Cao Cao's lips curled into a faint, bitter smile. "Then prove it," he said, his voice low but commanding. "Show me that you are more than words. Show me that you are worthy of the legacy I have built." The council adjourned in uneasy silence, the tension between father and son unresolved. For the court, the confrontation was a stark reminder of the fragile balance holding Wei together. Far from the court, Lady Zhen lived quietly, her days filled with the simple tasks of village life. Yet, she could not escape the shadow of her past. She thought often of Cao Cao and Cao Pi, of the roles they had played in her life and the ways they had shaped her fate. She wondered if they thought of her, or if she had been forgotten amidst the endless machinations of power. One day, as she tended to her small garden, a stranger arrived in the village. He was a traveler, his clothes dusty from the road, but there was something about him that set him apart. He approached her with a polite bow, his eyes kind but searching. "Lady Zhen," he said softly, and her breath caught. She had not heard that name in months. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice wary. He hesitated before replying. "A messenger from Suchong. I bring news of the Wei court." Her heart quickened. "What news?" "The Chancellor of Han, Cao Cao, has passed," he said. "His son, Cao Pi, now rules as King of Wei." The words struck her like a blow. She sank onto a low bench, her hands trembling. "Cao Cao is gone," she whispered, the weight of the news settling over her. The messenger nodded. "He spoke of you in his final days," he added. "He wished for you to know that he admired your strength and courage." Tears welled in her eyes, but she quickly wiped them away. "And Cao Pi?" she asked. "What of him?" The messenger hesitated. "He has consolidated his power, but the court remains divided. Your name, my lady, is still whispered among those who remember." Lady Zhen looked away, her gaze distant. The man who had shaped her life so profoundly was gone, and the one who had sought to control her now held the reins of power. She felt a strange mixture of grief, relief, and uncertainty. "Thank you," she said quietly. "You may go." The messenger bowed and departed, leaving her alone with her thoughts. In the years that followed, Lady Zhen remained in her village, far from the intrigues of the Wei court. She lived simply, her life a testament to resilience and survival. The empire continued to shift and fracture, the ambitions of men like Cao Pi and Liu Bei shaping the course of history. Yet, even as the world moved on, the legacy of Lady Zhen endured. She was remembered not as a pawn in the games of power, but as a woman who had defied the forces that sought to control her. Her story, though intertwined with the rise and fall of empires, was ultimately one of strength, dignity, and the quiet triumph of the human spirit. And in the quiet corners of Suchong, where the snow still fell on the gardens she once tended, her memory lingered, a reminder of the beauty and resilience that could exist even amidst the harshest storms.